She wasn't supposed to touch that document, but when the director's signature risked a compliance scandal, she uploaded her version and watched silence turn to shock. The conference room smelled of stale coffee, dry ink, and pressure. The kind that settles under your skin during Q4 when deadlines blur and every signature carries the weight of careers. Clara sat 3 seats from the head of the oval table, her laptop open, cursor blinking next to final policy version, Q4 update. No one looked at her. They rarely did when the director spoke. "Not for you," he said, tapping the printout like it was a gavel. "Sign it and move on." His voice had that gravelly certainty of someone who'd learned long ago that tone outweighed truth. Around the table, people nodded. The ritual had begun. She pressed her lips into a line. The director, Mr. Levant, didn't glance her way again. Just handed the stapled document to the VP of operations like it was a ceremonial torch. The signature page waited, blank and damning. Outside, rain tapped against the window, soft and insistent, like a question no one dared ask. 2 days earlier, Clara had flagged discrepancies in the clause regarding third-party compliance attestations. The wording had shifted, subtly, yes, but in a way that jeopardized their ISO alignment. Legal hadn't responded to her email. Yet. But now, the same paragraph she flagged was here, final, signed by Levant. She tried not to swallow too hard, he knew, and signed it anyway. Her office was a box of cold light and fluorescent hum. On her second monitor, the policy archive stood open, a silent graveyard of old and new documents. Her own version, marked as suggestion_C_Ward_V4, sat untouched, time-stamped, archived. She clicked, then double-clicked. The window opened. Side by side, she compared the final, signed version and hers. The lines were similar, until they weren't. In her draft, the vendor compliance review was explicitly listed under mandatory quarterly internal audit. In his, that clause was gone. 1 deletion, 1 risk, 1 signature. She didn't go to HR, not yet. Clara knew how this played out. If she flagged it without proof, it would be her word against his. Levant had tenure, reputation, and that quiet alliance with legal no one talked about, but everyone tiptoed around. Instead, she clicked, Move to Shared Archive. A prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to publish to Shared Department Archive? All document versions will become visible. Her cursor hovered. Her heart did not. She clicked, Yes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her version joined the master timeline. Official, traceable, visible to internal audit. The next morning, the air felt thicker in the open plan office, not with tension, not yet, but with the quiet static of change. It came at 10:42 a.m., a ping from the audit mailbox. Subject, clarification request, policy file discrepancy to Clara Ward. CC, Director Levant, internal audit lead, legal review team. They'd seen it, and the countdown had begun. The walk to the 16th floor felt longer than usual. Clara's heels struck the linoleum like a metronome counting down a silent verdict. She passed the framed company value posters. Integrity, agility, compliance. Each one now a bitter kind of joke. Outside the glass wall of conference room 16B, 3 men in suits and 1 woman in a navy blazer sat waiting. 1 seat was empty. Hers. As she entered, the woman looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ms. Ward, thank you for joining us. Clara sat. Her palms were dry, too dry. Not nerves, focus. The internal audit lead spoke first. We're conducting a routine cross-check following a flagged discrepancy in the Q4 policy archive. Routine, that word again. like a mask over something far from ordinary. He turned the monitor. 2 documents were opened side by side, hers and the signed version. Clara could almost see the moment they'd realized what she had, that someone had purposefully bypassed the compliance clause, and worse, signed it off. "Can you confirm which of these versions you authored?" She leaned in. "That one." Her voice was calm, measured. She pointed to her draft. "Uploaded 3 days ago. The metadata confirms it." "And you're certain the clause, Section 7.3, was present in your version from the beginning?" "Yes, it's in the versioning trail. You'll also find I emailed legal about it, twice." The room went still. The woman in navy, a legal liaison, shifted slightly in her seat. Clara noticed the way her gaze darted to the director's name on the digital signature. "Ms. Ward," said the man from audit, "just to clarify, did you receive any directive from Director Levant to omit Section 7.3 in the final policy?" There it was. Clara paused. "I received no directive, but I did receive this." She reached into her folder, pulled out the printed version he'd handed her in the meeting. His handwriting was still scrawled on the front page. "Not for you. Sign it and move on." Silence ballooned. The audit lead nodded slowly. "We'll take this under advisement." Back at her desk, Clara felt the shift in the air. People didn't talk to her. They paused near her, like satellites unsure whether to stay in orbit or drift away. The ones who always laughed too loud near the coffee machine were suddenly quiet when she passed. But she didn't care about whispers. What made her stop was seeing the policy archive again, this time with a red tag. "Non-compliant signature detected. Investigation ongoing." Someone had flagged it, and not just internally. The compliance portal, normally buried deep in the intranet, was now a top link on the homepage. She clicked. Her name was listed under Verified Contributor, Section 7.3 restored by C. Ward. The FOMO started quietly. A private Slack ping. "Did you seriously flag Levant's signature?" Then another. "Are you okay?" Then, "Holy hell, you might have just saved our ISO cert." At 6:14 p.m., just as the floor was clearing, her inbox blinked. Subject, confidential, director statement request. From HR Clara, exhaled. This wasn't over, but she wasn't alone in the dark anymore, and someone had just turned on the spotlight. "You won't believe what happens when audit gets the cross-sign logs. Stay close. Her next move isn't silence. Want to know how far the paper trail really goes? Drop a comment. If you've ever buried the truth in a shared folder, you'll want to stick around. This signature war is just getting started. Subscribe so you don't miss what they uncover next." The blinds were still tilted half open when Clara returned the next morning, casting slanted lines of sunlight across her desk like prison bars or spotlight beams, depending on how you chose to look at them. She chose spotlight. The office was unnaturally quiet for a Wednesday. She could hear the clink of a spoon stirring in a distant mug. The policy archive had gained sudden gravity, like a black hole everyone now orbited, but feared getting too close to. In her inbox, a single message from HR. Subject, interview rescheduled, internal review phase 2. Time today, 2 p.m. attendees, HR lead, legal liaison, compliance officer location. Zoom, link attached. Zoom, not in person this time. At 1:57, Clara joined the call. The usual electronic chime echoed into her headphones. 3 windows populated one after another like playing cards flipped face up. The HR lead, tight-lipped and poised. The legal liaison, still in navy, still unreadable, and a third she didn't recognize until the name tag flashed. D. Altman, compliance officer. The silence at first was the heavy kind, purposeful. "We appreciate your cooperation," said HR, reading from a screen. This review concerns the Q4 policy changes and associated documentation trail. Our aim is clarification. Altman jumped in. Ms. Ward, we've examined the document metadata. Your version of the policy includes the clause in question and predates the signed version. Clara nodded. Correct. Have you ever been instructed, implicitly or directly, to refrain from submitting your drafts to the archive? No. Director Levant didn't want me involved in the sign-off process, but that's not the same. Altman nodded. Then, we've found that 3 previous quarterly policies, Q1, Q2, Q3, show a similar pattern. Edits before signature, missing clauses, compliant versions never uploaded. It hit like a cold wind. 3 quarters, 3 times the system had blinked and let something pass. And, Altman continued, we've confirmed that only your Q4 draft aligns fully with external compliance requirements. That makes it the only compliant document across all 4 quarters. At 2:38 p.m., Clara left the Zoom meeting with a tightness in her chest she couldn't name. It wasn't fear. It was something like disbelief or fury wrapped in control. By 3 p.m., the whisper trail had become a low hum. Her department's Slack exploded. Someone dropped a screenshot. The policy archive homepage now featured a bold red banner. Pending compliance review. Q1 to Q4 under investigation, internal audit in progress. Below that, a quote, only her document is compliant. Compliance officer, review board. Clara leaned back in her chair, letting the hum of the air conditioning blur the noise in her head. One document, one signature, one voice that didn't stay quiet. They hadn't expected her to keep receipts. They hadn't expected her to be watching. They hadn't expected her to hit upload. But now the entire trail was out in the open. And the director? Still silent. But silence, she knew now, was not a shield. It was a spotlight. The weekly department sync was canceled. No reason, no reschedule. Just an Outlook ghost event marked deleted by organizer. In a company where rituals were sacred, especially meetings, this kind of disappearance made ripples. Clara noticed the glances first, the way people shifted in their chairs when she walked by, like she was radioactive or revered. The reactions split evenly. Some looked at her like she was dangerous, others like she was necessary. By noon, the whispers turned into messages. They're pulling logs from the SharePoint servers. Legal's involved, not just liaison level. Levant hasn't responded to audit in 24 hours. Clara read each one, heart steady, fingers still on her keyboard. She wasn't trying to fuel the fire, but she also wasn't pretending the building wasn't already smoking. In her inbox sat a message marked private. Subject, internal archive, edit history. Pull request from compliance team body. Clara, we're pulling raw edit logs on policy doc _Q3. Your name does not appear in the modification trail post-draft. Levant's credentials appear twice. We'd like to schedule a follow-up. It was the first time the accusation had shifted from possibility to pattern. Q3, Q4. If they pulled Q2 next, what would they find? At 2:46 p.m., Clara saw it. A new document posted in the archive. Not a policy, but a timeline. Preliminary review summary, Q1 to Q4 compliance chain. She opened it. Each quarter had a list. Original draft author modifying user, ID final signatory compliance match, Y/N. Her name appeared 4 times. Her compliance match, Y. Levant's edits, N. 3 quarters compromised under 1 signature, 1 quarter salvaged, hers. And that meant something else. Everything he'd signed could be voided. Suddenly, it wasn't just internal. There were vendors, partners, third-party obligations. This was the kind of breach that could cost certifications, clients, credibility. And they were circling in. At 5:07 p.m., she got a meeting invite from the CEO's office. The title? Clarification Request, Policy Chain Compliance. She stared at it, not audit, not HR, the CEO. A voice pinged her Slack. It was the intern from Ops. You're trending on the internal forum. They're calling you the redliner. The name stuck in her throat and almost made her laugh. Almost. She didn't ask for this spotlight. But now that it was on her, she wasn't stepping out of it. And the higher they look, the clearer the paper trail gets. The elevator ride to the executive floor was soundless, except for the soft mechanical hum beneath her feet, like the building itself was holding its breath. Clara had never been to the 31st, not once in her 5 years at the company. Up here, the carpet was thicker, the lights warmer, the silence curated. Every surface whispered, "You don't belong," until now. Outside the frosted glass doors of the CEO's office, she paused, adjusted the collar of her blouse, not for appearance, for armor. An assistant ushered her in with a nod. No words, just the kind of efficient gesture that meant this wasn't social. It was surgical. Inside, the room was glass, steel, and intention. The CEO, Alaric Devlin, stood by the window, arms crossed, his gaze on the skyline. Behind him, the policy chain document glowed faintly on a mounted screen. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "Do you know what I find interesting, Miss Ward?" Her voice was calm. "No, sir. That the only compliant quarter in our entire fiscal year is the one you submitted, unasked, uninvited." Now he turned. "There are people on this floor who would call that insubordination." She didn't blink. "I call it my job." Devlin gave a dry smile. Not friendly, not mocking, measuring. He walked to the table and tapped the screen. "I had audit trace the SharePoint chain back to October. Your name's clean, Levant's isn't." Silence. "I've worked with him for 12 years, he said, voice tightening at the edge. "But I won't burn this company to protect a man's legacy." Clara didn't move, but something inside her eased, just a notch. "What you did took nerve," he added, "and a paper trail. I respect both." He sat down, laced his fingers. "But now I need something more." She tilted her head, curious. "I want you to lead the redrafting task force, full rebuild of our compliance framework, and I want it signed by you before it ever touches legal." It should have felt like victory, but it didn't, not yet. "Respectfully," Clara said, "what happens to Levant?" Devlin's gaze sharpened. "That's being handled, off record for now, but this will reach the board." Then softer. "The system let this happen. You didn't. That matters to me." She walked out without speaking to the assistant, past the elevator, took the stairs instead. Every landing felt earned. Her phone buzzed at floor 26. Policy archive, new admin rights granted, C. Ward. Another buzz, Slack, private message from legal liaison. "Thank you. You protected more than the clause. You protected us." And the final one, internal audit form. Post, Q4 now marked as reference standard. Full compliance version by C. Ward. New tag, #redliner standard. Even elevators don't rise this fast, but reputations, they fall quicker. Stay close. The board's about to speak. The boardroom didn't have chairs, not because they forgot them, because that's how the executive debriefs were run. Standing, fast, clinical, brutal. If you couldn't stay on your feet, you shouldn't be in the room. Clara stood by the far end of the oval marble table, tablet in hand, the revised framework open and glowing. Around her, the board of directors formed a half circle of sharp suits and sharper eyes. Explain the deviation, said a woman near the center. Ms. Coe, head of risk. Her voice was clipped silk. Why weren't these breaches caught before Q4? Clara didn't flinch. Because the sign-off path bypassed shared visibility. Revisions were uploaded locally, not archived. Version control wasn't enforced. Everything looked clean until someone compared the fingerprints. And you were that someone. I noticed a clause was missing. I submitted a parallel version. It was visible in the shared drive metadata, and the audit team picked it up. A pause, just long enough to feel like a test. Then Mr. Bastian, board legal counsel. You understand what this means for our ISO status? Yes, and I've drafted a restorative timeline. We can submit the Q4 version as a compliant benchmark and build backward. I've included a digital fingerprint log with each draft to prevent rollback fraud. Murmurs, some skeptical, some impressed. Someone passed her a stylus. Walk us through Section 9, said Coe, the whistleblower clause. That's when Clara felt it, the shift, the moment the board realized she hadn't just submitted a good draft. She had rewritten the rules. Section 9 wasn't buried legalese anymore. She'd made it plain, accessible, traceable, protections, anonymity, escalation, digital trail. And beneath it all, the same idea that had gotten her here. One signature is never enough. By the end of the meeting, silence reigned again. But not the kind that ignored her. This silence was watching her. Coe finally spoke. We're placing Director Levant under formal review. Effective immediately. Interim policy oversight will be handled by Ms. Ward. No one objected. Some eyes widened, but no one spoke. As Clara stepped back, her tablet vibrated. A new shared folder invite. Q1 to Q4 recovery audit, owner C. Ward. She accepted it without hesitation. In the hallway, a voice caught her. Bastian, the lawyer. You realize the clause you saved might be what keeps this company certified through fiscal, right? She offered a small smile. That, or it's what finally makes us worth certifying. The board handed her oversight, but not everyone wants the redliner in control. And someone's still hiding behind the old drafts. Clara had barely stepped into the 14th floor lounge, usually a neutral zone, immune to departmental tension, when she saw them. 3 colleagues from her former team huddled near the espresso machine. They stopped talking the moment she entered. Not subtly, not kindly. Morning, she said, forcing neutrality into her voice. One nodded stiffly. Another pretended to check their phone. Only Michael, the junior analyst she'd mentored last year, held eye contact. Rough week, huh? He said, like a dare wrapped in sarcasm. She raised an eyebrow. Depends which version of the week you're reading. He half smiled, but didn't answer. She poured her coffee, black and hot, then left without another word. But she felt it. Not all enemies wear titles. Back at her desk, a new notification waited. Policy archive greater than comments on Q3-audit.xml user, m.lopez. Comment, why is C.ward editing files she didn't sign? Clara blinked. Lopez, the senior manager who'd always deferred to Levant, always played Switzerland, and now, throwing shade through tracked comments, she opened the thread. Another user had replied already. Compliance_reviewbot. Document was opened under admin level permissions, edits tracked, verified restoration of original clause. But Lopez wasn't done. New comment. Admin access doesn't equal authorship. This is revisionism. Clara stared at the screen, pulse low but steady. She didn't respond, didn't have to. Within minutes, 3 other comments appeared. J. Singh, audit. Original metadata shows Ward drafted the compliant clause. CFO_office. We're more concerned with accuracy than authorship ego. Anonymous. Funny how no one had a problem with revisionism when it removed compliance clauses. Boom. No need to raise her voice. The paper trail was doing the shouting for her. That afternoon, Clara got a meeting invite from TechOps Security. Odd. She joined the Zoom anyway. No cameras, just a voice. Miss? Ward, a calm baritone said. We're expanding the breach review. Your edits triggered a server-side flag. Turns out, Levant's credentials were used outside business hours on multiple occasions. What does that mean? It means someone logged in using his ID from an unregistered IP abroad. She froze. So, he wasn't the one making the edits? Unclear. But whoever it was, they were masking their location. We're digging deeper. We may need you to validate which files are authentic. The implications dropped like glass shattering on tile. This wasn't just negligence. This could be something darker. And if someone else was behind the unsigned changes, then the real signature breach hadn't happened on paper. It happened in the dark. The metadata trail points in a new direction, and Clara's not the only one with admin access. Stay sharp. The ghost editor might be watching. Clara sat in the glow of dual monitors, fingers motionless on the keyboard, eyes fixed on the audit logs from TechOps. 3 logins, all after midnight, all using Director Levant's credentials, all routed through a masked VPN exit node in Luxembourg. Her breath felt heavier in her chest, like her lungs had started buffering. Who the hell was logging in through Europe? She scrolled further and caught something worse. One of the logins had overwritten Q2 policy files exactly 27 minutes after she'd submitted her original draft to the archive. Backdated it. Not just masking mistakes, altering history. She called TechOps. I need trace data from the last edit session on q2-review.xml, she said. Already flagged for forensic copy, the agent replied. But you should know, there's a dual auth conflict on that session. Clara frowned. Explain. The session started under Levant's ID, but triggered a secondary handshake for higher-level permissions. The user entered a second key manually. So, not just Levant's login. Correct. Someone piggybacked it. Using an admin override. Her fingers tightened around the phone. There were only 3 people with that level of access, and Clara was one of them. At 3:44 p.m., she walked straight to the legal liaison's glass-walled office. I need 5 minutes. The woman looked up, startled. Is this about the edit logs? Yes, Clara said. And about who else had admin keys when Levant's credentials were used. The liaison leaned back. You think he didn't act alone? I think someone else knew what to delete, and when. A pause, then slowly. There's one name, someone Levant vouched for. Clara raised an eyebrow. Melvin Lopez, the same Lopez who had attacked her edits in the archive, the same one who called her work revisionism, the same Lopez who, her pulse kicked. He was backup admin during Levant's last vacation, the liaison continued. 3 months, enough time to mirror access. And enough time, Clara said slowly, to learn how to erase things without leaving fingerprints. Back at her desk, she dug deeper, opened old chat logs, audit meeting summaries, metadata of document drafts Lopez had touched. He never appeared directly, but his fingerprints were in the timestamps, in the naming conventions, in the subtle changes made 2 minutes after Levant's official sign-offs. And suddenly, it all clicked. Lopez had been the ghost behind the edits. Levant had been the face. That night, Clara stayed late, lights off, just the hum of her screen. She created a folder. shadow authorship chain Q1 to Q4, inside, side-by-side comparisons, VPN log traces, shared credentials. List a timeline of every non-compliant clause, Lopez's Slack comment history. A redacted email sent from Levant's address, but drafted in Lopez's syntax. Then she moved it to a new location. Audit board / pending evidence / co-signers. At 10:06 p.m., she posted a single message in the internal form. Compliance isn't about who signs first. It's about who edits last. CW. The ghost editor's mask is cracking, but exposure has its price, and Clara just lit the fuse. The first email landed at 7:03 a.m. Subject, unusual access alert, your credentials used from IT security, high priority. Body, Clara, your user ID was used in an attempted login at 3:41 a.m. from an unverified machine. Access was denied. Forensics are reviewing the attempt. We recommend immediate password and key reset. Her coffee went cold in her hand. Clara stared at the screen, jaw tight. First Levant's ID, now hers. The ghost editor wasn't just hiding. They were trying to frame her. At 8:15 a.m., she walked into the TechOps glass suite with fire in her eyes and a flash drive in her hand. I have a digital chain, she said, voice clear, showing every manipulated document, every access, every metadata mismatch tied to Lopez's logins. The agent looked up, alert. Do you have intent? I have timestamps and syntax patterns, Clara answered. And I have proof that someone attempted to log in as me hours after I submitted the internal audit folder titled Co-Signers. He plugged in the flash drive. As files bloomed on the monitor, folder after folder of meticulous digital receipts, he muttered, This is surgical. No, Clara corrected. This is panic. By noon, the glass offices buzzed. Legal teams leaned over tablets. Slack channels began filling with quiet eruptions. They tried to use her credentials now? This is a full-on framing attempt. Lopez is off the grid, not replying. Security just revoked his access. And then came the real spark, an internal memo. Leaked. Subject, preliminary findings, unauthorized edit trail from CEO office, 2, board, legal, internal audit. Excerpt, based on system logs, document forensics, and metadata analysis, the compliance breaches across Q1 to Q3 were facilitated through dual auth manipulation by M. Lopez. Director Levant approved altered versions without full awareness of their content integrity. Ms. Clara Ward's documentation and version history remain the sole consistently compliant trail. The hallway outside Clara's office went silent as the memo ricocheted through departments, and then came applause. Not loud, not performative, just a few hands, a few nods, a few people who finally understood the scope of what she'd protected. That afternoon, Clara was summoned one more time. Boardroom, same as before. But this time, the chairs were back, and one had her name. The CEO stood at the head of the table. Lopez has resigned. His exit will be managed off record. Levant's actions were negligent but not criminal. He's stepping down. Then he turned to Clara. And you? She didn't flinch. I want to rebuild, she said. From scratch. No more hidden edits, no more silent versions, a full compliance structure with shared authorship, zero ghost access, and daily trace logging. He nodded. Then you'll lead it, effective today. At 6:04 p.m., Clara opened the policy archive one last time. She created a new root folder, Foundation by the redliner, and beneath it, Q1 to Q4, compliant versions, shadow authorship index admin, key registry, live signature logbook. At the very bottom, she placed a locked read-only file. Title: Silence is not compliance. Inside, just one line. If you ever doubt whether one document can change everything, check the metadata. She was never looking for power. She was looking for proof. And now, the entire system carries her fingerprint. The air felt different now. Not lighter, just clear, like someone had finally opened a window in a building that had been sealed shut for years. Clara stood by the massive touchscreen in the new compliance war room, watching as real-time audit logs trickled across the display. Every policy draft, every signature, every clause revision, tracked, verified, transparent. No more side edits, no more whispered approvals, no more shadows. Across the room, new team members were onboarding. Not just legal and ops, but risk, tech, and even 2 vendor liaisons. It wasn't just a task force anymore, it was a firewall, with her name carved into its foundation. The CEO had called her earlier that morning. "Board just ratified the Clara protocol," he said. "You're now Chief of Document Integrity. It's yours to design." Her voice had almost caught in her throat. Almost. "Make it unbreakable," he'd added, "and undeniable." And she would. As she clicked through a training module, a familiar name popped up in the chat window. Michael, the junior analyst from weeks ago. Michael S. Ops. "Just finished the Clara protocol training. I get it now. Why you didn't sign and move on. Thanks for staying loud." She stared at it for a moment, then typed, "Clara W." I wasn't loud. I was precise. That night, she walked past the old policy archive interface, now fully deprecated. Just before closing the tab, she scrolled to the very bottom. There it was, the version that started everything. Q4_policy_C_ward_V4_final status, locked/compliant/reference standard sign-off chain, Clara Ward to audit to legal to board. A thin line of static text beneath it read, "Last unauthorized edit 76 days ago." She smiled. Not because it was over, but because, for once, she wasn't the only one watching the logs. They gave her the title, but she'd already rewritten the system, and this time, the clause wouldn't disappear.